Hello, everybody. I'm so glad you could be here for our first Unified Path session. Um, I'd first of all like to thank the support team that has helped me produce this programming and be here. And also, I would like to give particular thanks to Thalia Taylor, who has offered to be the moderator and to monitor the questions that come in over chat. Before we get started with our session today, in keeping with the notion of the unified path and the spiritual life, I'd like to take just a couple of moments to do what we call the heart opener, and that will put us in the right space for the rest of this conversation. So let's do that right now. This will only take a couple of minutes, but relax and take a deep breath in. And exhale, let everything go. Now another deep breath in. And exhale and let everything go. And now just resume your normal breathing. So often it helps to take a moment like this and do a simple exercise like the heart opener before any important activity where you want to give your intention, your focus, and your being. So we've done that now. So good. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. I'm very, very, very happy to have this session, and I'm particularly pleased because there have been so many positive responses to the Unified Path and to the material that we've offered. And because of all of the positive responses and all of the energy and all of the what I count as enthusiasm, there of course have been many questions. And I'd like to start by taking a few moments to look back at how we got here. Let me take a little sip of coffee first. The Unified Path is really a perspective, perhaps better called a meta-perspective, about spiritual paths, spiritual life, spiritual work in general. And it evolved from my lifelong involvement in the spiritual life and in many spiritual practices and methods that go back since I was quite young, and had something of a strong glimpse experience in high school. And that was enough to set me out on the road of trying to find the deeper values, the hidden meaning, and the more whole side of life. And that sent me down a number of paths, all of which were interesting, some productive and some not. And eventually I discovered a philosophy called perennialism, which is really a restatement of what is often called the Sophia Perennis, that philosophy that there is a truth, a Sophia, that is expressed perennially in all of the various wisdom traditions that are available. That acknowledges them and to some degree from the user's point of view legitimizes them. But it is, however, a philosophy, and philosophies can't really be practiced as philosophies. One needs more than a philosophy. One needs a method. One needs a practice. And I found one after some great searching, and I entered a Sufi circle, which I've been part of for many decades. And about a dozen years ago, some friends of mine and I from this circle decided that there was something missing from our practice, and we began to look afield for other things, other practices, other spiritual approaches that would be complete and fulfilling. Now, in the process, I joined several other spiritual groups and practices, and very often in that process, I would meet many people who had been practicing this particular philosophy or religion or spiritual methodology for a number of years who somehow felt unfulfilled. They felt that maybe they weren't making any progress. Maybe they felt that things had become stale or that their work had become rote and hollow. And they didn't know what to do about that. Often, in taking those questions to the teacher or guru, the guru would certainly explain that this process was legitimate, but that what they should be doing is more of what they were already doing and giving more of themselves to it. That sounds good in theory, but is very difficult in practice. Because after all, doing more of one thing is really to do more of one thing. Now, as we studied this problem, it was easy to look at history. And having looked at the history of spirituality in general and mysticism in particular, and by mysticism I will take the classic definition of mysticism, which is the process of knowing God, knowing the divine, knowing reality directly. Not indirectly or symbolically, but directly, personally, and existentially. And looking at the great lights of history, the great saints and sages from all traditions all over the planet, names that we all know, including people from St. Francis and St. Teresa, to Honen and Hui Hai, to Lao Tzu and Ibn Arabi and Al-Hallaj, wherever one looks to find these great lights and studies what their practice was, it's clear that their practice involved their whole person, that these full traditional practices, as they at least used to be taught, involved the whole person, not simply one technique. And often one of the problems with many of the new approaches, or I should say newer approaches to spirituality, to knowing, to enlightenment, is that they are one technique. And it may be a good technique, and it has certainly helped awaken the person who has brought it to us, but it is still a technique. And in the context of looking at the great saints and sages of history, one can see that a technique doesn't address the whole person. And a spiritual process, a spiritual practice, if it's going to be all it can be, if it's going to bring us all it can, if it's going to allow us to participate as fully and completely as possible, needs to address all of us, a holistic process. And for the purposes of discussion, and in the discussion that we're now having, we look at the whole person in terms of what can be described as the body, mind, heart, and soul. There may be other ways to describe the whole person, but this is a pretty good way, and this is the way we use in the Unified Path, to look at the various aspects of ourselves and of practice that we can use, and where we need more practice or more knowledge or more work, or maybe in some cases less work. But again, the objective here is to bring all of us, the whole person, into the practice. And there's certainly much more that can be said about that. And as you can tell, I'd probably like to do that. But since we only have a limited amount of time here, I'd like to turn things over to Thalia, who has been monitoring the chats. And I'm ready to take some questions.
Thank you for that explanation, Terry. That was beautiful. We do have questions ready and waiting. I'll let you take a sip.
Good.
Our first question comes in from Joseph Bernardo, and his question is something I think a lot of people would like to hear what you have to say about. He writes, I'm a total newbie. How does one incorporate or avoid the news and social media to create and maintain a healthy, peaceful life?
Well, I think avoiding the news and avoiding social media is something that can help bring peace to one's life. But I think more important than avoiding things is the notion of deciding what one can do, what one can take up, what one can use to fill one's life in a positive way, rather than simply reacting to the things that one hears in social media and on the news. So what I'd like to suggest to Joe
Joseph?
is that he look at our website, theunifiedpath.com, and look at the whole of the Unified Path, and then go to the self-assessment video we have, so that he'll have some clues about what areas of his life are being used, maybe are being accentuated, maybe are being undervalued, so that he can reconfigure his daily life in terms of a whole practice, which is our objective here in the Unified Path.
Thanks, Joe, for the question, and thank you,
Yes,
Terry.
thank you, Joe.
We have a new question. This is from @Steratul. It's Steratul. Sorry if I got that wrong. They write, my heart has been closed for a long time. Is there any way to open it?
Yes, I think the whole notion of a spiritual life or a spiritual practice is that of opening the heart. And in terms of what one can do, it's a matter of employing all of the various parts of oneself in a practice that allows oneself to expand and to become what one can become. And even parts of this practice, like working with the body, or working with service or some kinds of devotional activities, are things that actually open the heart. You know, it has long been said that yoga is a physical practice that opens the heart. Well, if someone's heart is closed because of conditions or experience, then some kind of action is necessary, and the action that is best are those that are consistent with the notion of opening the heart. And that's what spiritual practice is all about. And it's easy to focus on one's problems, but it's also sometimes much better to look at the positive aspects, because in dealing with those positive aspects, or dealing with the things one likes, one loves, one understands, that often opens the heart. And this is a process that is wonderful and actually well known, but maybe not often practiced as much as possible. I hope that's some help.
And we appreciate the question from Steratul. The next question comes from New York, from Tony C. And Tony C. asks, hello from New York. Thank you for providing this space. And thank you, Tony, for the question. I'm a big follower of Terry Moore's channel. I'm curious to know what's different in this one.
Well, the Terry Moore channel, Terry Moore Awake, is really a condensation of bits of practical wisdom that I've acquired over the years. And much to my surprise, I've found that a lot of people enjoy hearing those or finding those of some practical value. And I'm happy to provide practical knowledge or practical points of view, or maybe new and interesting points of view gleaned from my experience, whatever that has been. That's different than here at the Unified Path, because the Unified Path here is really focused on spiritual work and on the spiritual parts of oneself and on the body, mind, heart, and soul that need to be integrated and operate together so that we can become what we can be, which is to say, enlightened or awakened, or to have this deep existential certainty about what one is, what life is, what the world is.
And I'm sure you would love to thank Tony for being a Terry Moore fan.
I hope there are more. Yes, Tony, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And also I appreciate your coming to this conversation.
Now on to question 4. This one comes from Maria Jose Lara. Sorry if I got that wrong. And they write, I am a practicing Christian. My mother is Jewish. One of my best friends is Muslim. If we wanted to adopt the unified path, would we have to give up our religions?
I'm very pleased to get this question because it's something I hear many times. And the answer is no, that's not required at all. In fact, what I think you will find is that your work with the unified path will bring to light and life parts of the tradition that you are already practicing. And since you mentioned 3 established wisdom paths that are historical and tried and true, as it were, then if those are where you are centered, then what the unified path can do is help you find elements within those traditions that help in the various ways that we're talking about in using the body, mind, heart, and soul, because all of those traditions, at least initially or principially or traditionally, or perhaps orthodoxly, have parts of their practices that focus on those very things. So it isn't necessary to give up anything unless you really find that something is missing. But I don't think you will. I think you'll find that the unified path will add to your practice and maybe bring it to a little fuller notion of development in life. I hope that's true. And I'd like to hear more from you after you have been with the unified path a little longer, and let me know how that has worked out in terms of practicing the traditions that you're already using.
So I just want to follow up. You're saying that in your experience, you have seen people go back after embracing the unified path. They go back more fulfilled to their
I have
traditions,
seen
or
that
they
happen.
find some meaning in their former or the tradition that they practice.
Yeah, that's right. I have seen on many occasions, after some time with the unified path, people return to the religion of their childhood because they discovered there was more there. And that does not at all mean that they had to leave the unified path, which they continue to participate in conjunction with, in some cases, their childhood religion, because they work together, and it's the whole point of the unified path is to bring the whole person into practice, and that's what these traditional religions and orthodoxies used to do, at least.
Wonderful. We have some more questions. The next one
Okay.
comes in from Jan Herringall, and Jan writes, I spend a lot of time in front of the computer. Does watching YouTube spiritual videos count for the mind part of the unified path?
Well, let's talk a little about the mind part before I answer that question. When we talk about body, mind, heart, and soul, there is a part of us that we call the mind that is in search of information, and that information very often points us in the direction of real wisdom, or it in many ways satisfies or allows other problems to get out of the way. But the mind can be very helpful in this process and should be used and really needs to be used. We usually talk about using the mind in terms of reading traditional sources or great religious works from different traditions. And that's very valuable. The problem with watching YouTube videos is that it doesn't really involve generally much investment of oneself. It's so much easier to watch a YouTube and be extremely passive about it, much as if it were the radio playing in the background, unless one really focuses on what is being taught and what one does. And I think it's more difficult in that environment, but it's not impossible. So the general answer is it would be better to stick with an in-person source or maybe great literature. But if you are down to this one option for some reason, use it, but use it as knowingly and as intentionally as possible, with as much desire to participate and get out of what is being taught. And I hope that's helpful. That may sound a little vague, but
So I'm sure Jan had a great question there, and I'm sure that they might want to know, do you watch YouTube spiritual videos?
I do occasionally watch the spiritual videos. It's not what I would call part of my practice, but there are several people who I enjoy following in a casual sense. I often find people have things to say that I find encouraging, enlightening, and positive. And of course, there's something about spiritual work that in its nature likes to be shared, and likes to be, Plato said, the good has the property of wanting to communicate itself. And I think that's true of spiritual work, and certainly true of my work.
That's an
so
excellent
I hope that's
point.
an answer.
Yeah, excellent point. And today that communication can happen on YouTube or on live stream. We have another question from Vanessa P. I attended a retreat last summer where I felt I was in touch with consciousness, happy and free, but the next week I lost the connection and started to feel sad. How do I get back to that connection?
Well, first of all, congratulations. I think it's a wonderful thing to have had what's called a glimpse, and this certainly seems like a glimpse. And what I would suggest is that you think about that glimpse and focus on that quality, and then look at the rest of your life and see what it is that's keeping you from that. Acknowledge those things and then release them. And I think that's probably a pretty good general description. The Unified Path has, of course, things to say about all of the parts of life, which one should practice, the objective of which is to, again, be in that state of knowing, of having this existential certainty and joy of the inherent goodness and love of existence.
Thank you, Terry. We have some more questions.
All right. All right.
Gerald Matthews writes and asks, I feel that AI and technology are making this world so much less human, and it just seems hopeless. How can I not get so frustrated and angry?
Well, first of all, by not recognizing hopelessness.
Okay.
Because there's something in hopelessness that assumes a future, and that certainly is undecided and can't be decided. What one can do is be as positive as possible now and make the best possible decisions you can with that in mind, so that you're not caught in the hopelessness of this ongoing, mindless explication of what's called artificial intelligence. That's going to continue. But it's a tool, as it were, and it's not real intelligence. And the part of you that is disappointed is the part of you that recognizes that. And the disappointment may be a recognition, but it's that part of you that makes that recognition that's important in this process. So the more you have an activity, a work, a spiritual process that allows you to separate those things, or to focus on what's positive, or to focus on the knowing rather than the thinking, then you'll be well ahead and not trapped by this hopelessness that we all often encounter sometimes.
I think that's a great point, especially when it comes to the subject of AI. Concentrate on the knowing, not the thinking. And I'm sure that...
That's right, and that's all too much a sort of categorical modern trap, where we're all caught by the thinking rather than the knowing. And often in my workshops, I use a little exercise, which I'll just share, which is just to ask the question, are you here? Well, you can answer that question without thinking about it. In fact, thinking about it doesn't help you because you know the answer immediately. And regardless of what kind of ratiocination you can get into about knowing and being, the answer is evident and it's clear and it's known. It's not thinking, it's knowing. I hope that's helpful.
I'm sure it's very helpful for our audience. We have time for one last question, and this one I know you're going to want to answer because it comes in from Greg Good.
Oh.
Hi, Terry. I'm asking for a friend who's interested in the TUP. He couldn't make the live stream. How would you distinguish between awakening and enlightenment, and are they the same thing?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank my good friend, Dr. Greg Good, who is well known for his books on the direct path, which I use, and which certainly has a place in the unified path. And the distinction between what were the
Awakening and enlightenment.
and enlightenment. That's like the difference between knowledge and knowing.
Okay.
But on the whole, the question really gets down to what is enlightenment? And enlightenment is a knowing. It is a deep, unshakable, existential knowing that we, the world, and everything in it are one. And that knowledge is glorious and is the knowledge that people have sought since time began. And it is a knowledge which, when one assimilates it, when one has this deep existential knowing, it makes everything else seem pretty tame, and is really a glory that makes the suffering of the ages seem as nothing because of its positive love, perfection, oneness, unity. Some would call it God.
Beautiful answer, Terry.
Thank you, Thalia.
We actually have another question that
We have another question.
that we would love to put in there. We have time. This is from Laura, and Laura writes, "Some teachers say there's nothing to do to be free from suffering, and others say there are things that we must do. It's so confusing. What do you say?"
I think those are two very different points of view that are really addressing different topics. But in terms of suffering, what I think is that there are things one can do to become whole, and I think we just used the word enlightened, which is not a place of suffering at all. And suffering is generally a lack of goodness or a lack of that which is positive. And one can get away from that by dealing with the things that are concretely positive and express the good and the unity and the one. And that's what practice, the spiritual life, and the unified path address.
Thank you, Terry. We have two more questions, and then we can
Well,
finish.
they keep. They
I just
come,
want to make
all
sure.
right, I'm happy to answer
I
them.
want to make sure I get all these great questions in, and thanks to everyone who's submitting questions today. I'm going to try to get this right. It's Rando Random bystander. So this is the
It's a
username.
question from a random bystander.
Yes.
Okay, good.
The way it's on the screen, I didn't see it all together. But good question from random bystander. In the unified path, what is the place of God?
This is in many ways a language problem. The term God is a term which is synonymous with the one, with unity, which is perfection. And that's what all paths aim to show us. So the question is, where is God in the unified path? God is the perfection, the oneness that we hope to understand existentially, identify with, and understand our participation in, because that's who we really are.
To follow up on that, are you okay, or have you experienced people that sometimes get hung up on the semantics of the word God? And
Oh, certainly.
are they able to substitute another word, say the universe or something else?
I see that a lot. There are words that I would prefer, not because I think they're essentially better, but I think for my use, words like awareness and consciousness are really, in Western language and maybe in English, tend to be more accurate in terms of the particular connotation of the term. Throughout the world of spirituality, one uses different terms for these things, and that varies from culture to culture and language to language. But for our purposes here, when we talk about these things, I think we can use the term awareness or consciousness or the one or unity or God.
And we hear awareness and consciousness a lot these days in lots of different realms. The last question, oh, this is a great one to end on. Thank you, Danny, for this question. Danny writes, okay, so as someone just discovering this work, where should I begin?
Thank you, Danny. Good question. I would suggest you start by visiting the Unified Path website at theunifiedpath.com and read over our literature, and then look at some of the videos and see if some particular aspect of the path is more attractive to you than others as a place to start. And then, of course, we have a self-assessment video that you might find useful in terms of examining your own life and practice in terms of what you're doing. And we have other videos that focus on the different areas, body, mind, heart, and soul, of being one, of the whole practice of being a whole person. Thank you, Danny.
Great. So we're going to be wrapping up. Terry, any final words you want to say to the audience?
Stay tuned. Please visit the unifiedpath.com, subscribe, and there will be other programs online and maybe in person and maybe in exotic places. We'll see, but please stay with us and subscribe. And I'd like to thank Thalia for being here and wading through all these questions with me. And I'd like to thank the rest of the team for helping produce today's event. Thank you all, team. Thank you.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you, Thalia.